for a moment saying that we evolve on the spiritual path to a place where our consciousness is so expanded that I'm one with you and I know you probably better than you know yourself. I know what's arising in your subconscious. I can feel what's happening in the currents of your life force. We are talking about awakening bit by bit to the Olympian level of special capacity that every soul's capable of, but that some souls embody. Hi, I'm Shakti Durga. Welcome to Mystery School, ancient wisdom for everyday life, a space where we explore the sacred, awaken inner knowledge, solve problems, and learn to live from the divine within. Hello, I'm Shakti Durga. Welcome to Mystery School for this week. Back in the day, I enjoyed reading about the masters of the Far East and all of the miraculous things that they can do. And at first I wasn't sure whether I believed that it was true or whether I thought this is someone with a really good imagination who's writing about something that might be an inner plane mystical experience, but is it real that people can do these things in the physical world? That was a long time ago, maybe about 35 years ago when I started reading those books. And since that time, I've met some of these masters of the Himalayas, of other parts of India, and of other countries. And I would now say, yes, it's true. These people, or some people, are able to do things that the average person would regard as completely miraculous. Why is it possible that some beings can have a consciousness that is so different from ours, an ability to navigate the world that is so different from ours, when they live within the same world of physics and science and reality that the rest of us do, but yet their life is so different? Some things we can be really helped with science, and I love the scientific method. I think it's amazing. And I think there are parts of awareness, particularly if you go beyond the physical plane, that are only just starting to be subjected to the scientific method. And in fact, there's some parts that I wonder whether in fact they can be. And these are called the mysteries. And some people say the mysteries start where science ends, and that over time science makes inroads into what used to be the mysteries, and we have explanations for all kinds of things. But at the moment I'm talking about people who can have awareness of the past and the future as though it was happening right now and they were just telling you what it was like. And these things are verifiable. I've seen masters who, when a child is born, can predict and advise a family about how the child should be raised, given the destiny of that child and what the teacher has seen that child doing when they're a grown-up. So they're able to look through time and see what's on the other side. I remember one example of a family of business people that had a guru in India, and they were very devoted to their guru, and when their son was born, they were very excited because they thought that they'd given birth to the heir to their business empire, and they took him along to this Swami to be blessed. And the Swamiji said, no, I'm not going to bless this person to be a business person. That's not their dharma, it's not their destiny. This person is going to be a rock star. Can you imagine that you're, a serious person with a business empire, and suddenly this person that you trust is telling you that your son, who is only 2 foot long at this stage, is going to be a famous rock star. And we know that that's a tough industry, and that many are called but few are chosen to be successful at the pinnacle of music, And so this was a crazy conversation for the parents, and they looked at each other and they were like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Anyway, time rolled by. Sure enough, this child became a Bollywood superstar. Now, how did that Swami, who was sitting in some field in remote India, how did he know? He didn't live anywhere near Bollywood. It wasn't a thing. So it's just he knew. He just knew. Another teacher I knew was being told an anecdote by someone where I was with them, and the anecdote was about something that their grandfather had done. And the teacher stopped, this yogi stopped the person and said, "It wasn't your grandfather, it was your great-grandfather." And they went, "Oh, I don't think so," and continued on with the story. And when they got home, they checked, and yes, the anecdote was actually the great-grandfather, not the grandfather who had, gone to a certain place and seen a certain thing. So it's sort of like the clarity of these people and what they're able to show with their consciousness, Another teacher that I know is able to manifest items. Usually they're pendants. There'll be a silver pendant or a rudraksha bead, which is like a seed off a sacred tree in India that's sacred to Shiva, or a crystal bead or something like that. Sometimes little statues, sometimes larger statues. And these things come out of thin air. This teacher usually wears a dhoti, and it's not like there's something up their sleeve, because they don't even have any sleeves. That one time there was a person who said, "I'm a bit skeptical about all of this." It was a medical doctor. He said, "I'm very skeptical about all of this. I think that somehow you're making this happen, through magic or through a trick, or you're hiding something and then revealing it." So the teacher said, "Just go over to that mandarin tree over there," which was in full fruit, and said, "Pick any mandarin you want." And so the guy picked a mandarin and he brought it back, and he didn't give it to the teacher. The teacher said, "Hold it in your hand." And he said, "I want you to open that." He said, "Who's the god that you think the most of?" And the guy said, "Hanuman, the monkey god. I love Hanuman." And the teacher said, "Well, peel your mandarin." And he peeled the mandarin, and inside the mandarin that had come straight off the tree, that looked the same as all the other mandarins, was a statue of Hanuman. And what's more, all the segments of the mandarin had grown around the Hanuman, so that you could see that the mandarin had formed with the Hanuman inside of it. And so that tree and that teacher's consciousness and that mandarin had been prepared for weeks or months for this day that was coming, where this doctor would pick this mandarin off this tree and open it and find the deity of their choice inside, like an actual statue. So these are things that defy the rules of logic or science that we understand, and yet there are thousands, millions of these experiences that people have with different people whose consciousness is hugely expanded. These people don't have the usual conception of self that you or I would have. For you and I, we are much more attached to or aware of our conditioned or egoic level of who am I? I am this separate being who's wearing this dress with this scarf, who's sitting in this garden, and I have this career and I have these parents or whatever. And yet they see themselves as I am that I am. Now, in the Old Testament of the Bible, I am that I am is said to be the name that was revealed to Moses, that the divine said, "Call me that, I am that I am," from within the burning bush when Moses had his extraordinary spiritual epiphany, probably one of many that he'd had, but a very significant and profound one, where he came face to face with the divine. So, I am that I am. I've heard that said now for many, many years. But recently, on my initiatory journey, I've come to understand it differently to how I used to. And instead of I am that I am being a cool name for the divine, I now see it as I am that, and 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 I am that, I am that, I am that. There is nothing that I'm not. And that's really what that name is trying to tell us, that that which is within everything in creation. It's within you, it's within me, it's within everyone. It doesn't matter whether that person is a good person who spends their whole time helping others, or it's a terrible person who never helps anybody and only ever thinks about themselves. The same divine is in everyone. I am that, I am that, I am that, I'm that. It's kind of like a story of awakening to come into the I am that story more deeply and more deeply through the various initiations that we have. When we are aware of another person as well as ourselves, as in to the same extent that we're aware of ourselves, we're then able to know things that are potentially very helpful in the relationship we have with that person or for that person. So for instance, I'm a healer, and in my healing practice I find that when I'm practicing Ignite Your Spirit therapy, I know things about the people I'm sitting with that I couldn't possibly know because they haven't told me. And I don't know the person, don't know their background, but I know stuff. I know about them, I know about their soul. I can perceive the geometries of light and sound that are within their soul. How did that happen? Didn't used to happen. It's been a journey. And that journey has had some very big bumps upward along the way, where this day saw nothing, this day, oh my God, there's all this stuff revealed. How does that happen? Actually, I think it happens through divine grace, and I think it happens through divine blessings. But we have to be open to them, and we have to be ready to walk that journey. Now, another teacher I know, in fact, two of my two teachers, I have one in North India, one in South India, and I love them both very dearly. It's like having a spiritual mum and a spiritual dad, but then when my consciousness is really expanded, I see them as one, and that I am one with them, and that's a good day, But both of them, you could say, read minds. Now, they're not doing it in a prying way. It's just that whatever's going on in you is known to them as intimately as if it was their own thought. And it's because their consciousness is so expanded that they are that. I am that. I am that. I'm you. You're me, I'm you. And whereas we could say that, and it might be a nice thing to say, but it wouldn't really mean that much, when they have that consciousness, when they focus on you, when they meditate on you by and meditation for them is consistent. Like, I don't think they really come out of some kind of meditative state, even though they're in their normal life, they're seeing people, they're crossing the road, they're buying something, or they're doing normal things. They're looking at budgets, or they're advising on something, quite deep. But they're in this state of, they're always connected. They're always in this state of, I am that I am. So when they're trying to plan a new hospital or a new school or something, or a new farm, or whatever it is that they're planning, they can perceive how it will unfold. So from the plan itself to the fruition of the plan, their consciousness, their Shakti, their energy, and their Icha Shakti, which is their willpower, it's right there. It is carrying this thing to where it needs to be, and then it's enjoying that thing in the world. And because I am that. So the cows are self, the building is self, the ground it's built on is self, the air that everyone's going to breathe, all the workers on the construction are self. So that's how expanded their consciousness is. So when we're talking about the path of the mystics, we are talking about awakening bit by bit to the Olympian level of special capacity that every soul's capable of, but that some souls embody. Now, I've seen it myself. I have a long association with both of these teachers. They're both extraordinary human beings, and they're the real deal, And so they both give the blessings to myself, to my husband, to my daughter, to other people that we know. And It's just been extraordinary watching the journey of our own shifts in consciousness since knowing them. And I'm not going to tell you it's been easy, because frankly it hasn't been. But anything that's real and worth it is probably going to be something you need to work for. And let's face it, if we don't have to work hard for something, do you think we really value it? I don't think so. So there is work on the spiritual path, but it's the work of knowing yourself. And so at the end of the day, there is nothing more satisfying. Now, I'm not for a moment saying that we evolve on the spiritual path to a place where our consciousness is so expanded that I'm one with you and I know you probably better than you know yourself. I know what's arising in your subconscious. I can feel what's happening in the currents of your life force. So when we get, this is a good stage to be at, but there's always more, you know what I mean? And in Shanti Mission, we train people for this. We train for this expansion of consciousness, but we also train to manage the hard times, to manage the setbacks, to manage the disappointments, or to manage the inevitable outpouring of realization, not only of your light, but of your dark. You can't just realize your light. You have to look at the rest as well. In Christianity, they have a very interesting tradition, particularly in later versions of Christianity, let's say hundreds of years after Jesus died until the present time, of considering self as a sinner and to focus on how unworthy we are. Now, that's not an approach I take in Shanti Mission, but it is an approach that I respect, because what they're doing is looking at their dark so that they can reveal more light. Another approach is look at your light, but it will reveal more dark, because both need to be absorbed, transmuted, and woven together into an energy that becomes very golden. And then we're talking about the Lakshmi consciousness, the Krishna consciousness, the Christ consciousness. And it's from that kind of consciousness that's very developed in some human beings that we derive masters of the path. And the mastery truly is not the miracles, it's not the siddhis or the powers that are exhibited by these masters, but I do think sometimes they are like the shiny things that attract people to the path. But it's the capacity to build love in themselves and in the people around them. That is the true miracle. And in fact, another teacher that I started off with in India years ago used to say, I can manifest rings, I can manifest necklaces, I can manifest any kind of gemstone, I can manifest flowers, I can manifest whatever you want, but the hardest thing to manifest is a loving human heart. And you think to yourself, okay. So that's what we're doing. We're growing in love. In Vedanta, it's called Mahashakti, or the power to love. And the divine love is known as Prema, or the unconditional ocean of divine blissful love. And what we do is we weave the divine ocean of blissful love into our heart with the cultivation that comes of the Mahashakti, and then we can live from that. And bit by bit we learn to live from that more and more. And not only do you change, but you'll find that even the people around you who aren't doing any spiritual training, many times people report to me, and I've had it in my own life, they change too. They get like a free ride because someone they love has entered into the training of the mystics. It is highly practical. It is challenging. It is probably the best game in town while you're on earth. And it's about the transformation, really, of the locus of consciousness from I am this, to I am that, 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 I am that. And this is a journey. And so if you want to know more about it, it's like, yes, we can talk about awakening experiences, which I'm happy to talk about on another day. But what happens after that? What happens after the awakening experiences? And that's where we've got to learn to carry the sacred fire. Carry it and develop it. And when the flame's lit, you pass it on. Namaste. Thanks for joining for this episode of Mystery School. Don't forget to check out shantimission.org or my website, shaktidurga.com. And there'll be a retreat in July 2026 to India, to the ashram of one of my teachers in the Himalayas called Carrying Sacred Fire. And I'm sure you'll find it fascinating should you wish to come with us. Details are on my website, shaktidurga.com. And until then, namaste. Thanks for joining me for Mystery School, Ancient Wisdom for Everyday Life. For deeper experiential spiritual exploration, join me for Mystery School Living Light series. And for more information, visit shantimission.org. See you next time.